GD Vegas Full Show. Welcome back to another episode of Craic on the Coast. That podcast here on the South Shore of Massachusetts, but goes well beyond that. And we welcome everybody in for another episode. And today it's going to be all about Gaeilge. We are excited. If anyone has been mindful of how they see things on social media or in your Irish or Irish American community, you will know that language is making a comeback and is something we really are passionate about here on Craic on the Coast. And we want to promote it and we want to get more involved. Right, Greg?
Absolutely. I mean, this is so important for us to, not only retain our history and our culture, but, just be an example to future generations and, learning more, not only about speaking Irish, but the history of the Irish language itself is absolutely fascinating. I think it's something that anybody who's interested in Irish history could get into. So I'm really excited about this podcast.
Yeah, and so to help us bring a lot of that to light and to have a really nice in-depth chat about the language and where it's been and where it's going, we bring on Mollie Guidera from Irish with Mollie. And we're so excited to have you on the podcast. We're so excited to have you on,
absolutely
Mollie.
Thrilled. I'm delighted to be here. Gurv Mila Mahagwiv. And I'm so tóca, meaning taken or impressed with your effort and your beautiful pronunciation.
I'm trying.
Yeah, and that's what it takes.
We don't like to encourage that. We don't give them a big head.
No, it's fantastic. It's great to be here. Gurv Mila Mahagwiv, thanks a million. And I agree with everything. I mean, language is culture and it's so special and it's such a privilege to have the opportunity to grow it together, not just to keep it alive, but to actively grow our language and explore it. There's so much to be curious about.
So to start, for anyone that has not read your Gaeilge guide, I actually got it on Audible. I spend a lot of time in the car for work, and it was a very enjoyable listen. But for people that have not read that yet, where did your passion originally come for the language?
Well, I suppose many different facets. I was deeply inspired by my grandmother, who was a lifelong learner. She cycled all around Ireland. She worked for Anóige, the hosteling organization, and she spoke Irish quite a lot. And I think the most important thing is just a positive attitude in anything you want to do, like you say, giving it a go and just trying it out. So she used to write a bit of Irish in cards to us and finish phone calls with gra, more, big love, and really kind of instill a sense of how important it was to embrace our heritage and identity and that authentic culture of Ireland, especially growing up in the 90s and then living through, the Celtic Tiger when Ireland was seriously, and still is in many ways, deeply colonized and dealing with inferiority complex and everything. So she was a great mentor and kind of role model to me. And I suppose then leaving Ireland, I worked in the Basque Country and Japan. I sailed around the world teaching in Hungary and Portugal and all over the place. And I think when people leave Ireland, they become even more passionate and more proud to be Irish and to explore Irish culture and language. And I was teaching English, so I was working out how to teach a language and how to apply those skills to our native, Celtic, indigenous, endangered language and realizing, wow, it's so precious and valuable. It contains a whole other world view. We need to highlight this and kind of do our best to use it and enjoy it. So those were really impactful for me, I think.
Wow, that's
So,
great.
Mollie, one thing I've noticed lately is it seems like the Irish language is having a real glow up culturally. People are more and more interested in learning about it. I especially see it with the young people. I was recently at a networking event, and there were a few young people over from Ireland who spoke incredibly well. And they were absolute celebrities at the bar we were at. Everybody was asking them to translate this and say that. And is that something you think is newer, or is that something you responded to when you started the the website, which is incredible, by the way. I subscribe
Thank you so
myself. I don't use
much.
it nearly enough, but I love your marketing, and I just love the interaction on the website is just it's so pleasant because you don't really would you get exactly what you want and nothing else. And for somebody like me who's not always happy to be online, it's a real pleasure. But what would you say about the cultural resurgence that I think is out there? I don't know if you would agree.
Definitely. No, I appreciate it a lot. And I'm very grateful to have our growing community. We have, over 10,000 students now learning online together, daily opportunities to speak and listen and read and write together, coaching and feedback. And I think that's what really makes it. It's so many different elements have occurred. I think with An Colleen Kewen, the film that came out, maybe was it 4 or 5 years ago now, and it was up for an
Yeah.
Oscar. That was a real turning point. I think Mancon McGann as well, publishing books like 32 Words for Field. He, Suvnas Shiri Da Anam, eternal rest for his soul. He passed away last year. He was really the key holder to open this door and allow us all to walk through and to make the language more accessible and inclusive. And I think creating innovative ways to share it, and we have more knowledge now on teaching methodologies and learner types. Everything seemed to kind of happen in unison. It's like this wave that turned into a flood, and it's here to stay. Like kneecap, of course, people are calling it the kneecap
Yeah.
effect. So I think it's not like you can really pinpoint one person or one place or one thing, but it's kind of like the Republic of Ireland is still quite new and still getting to know herself and realizing who are we and what do we want and what do we have to give the world. And I was just speaking to a student of mine about also Irish Americans and the Irish diaspora in general. It's like this pride and preservation of the language and culture has grown outside of Ireland. And it's like this ripple has come back in to feed or nurture this maybe decaying old oak tree that has its buds and branches spreading out all over the world, and it's coming back in. So I have so much respect and appreciation for my students in over 85 countries around the world who kind of kept up the love for Irish and the demand for learning and the demand that's there to really connect on an authentic level with the culture. So many different things. I think even the pandemic, people were really keen to dive into their own heritage and create authentic communities online and wherever they lived around the world. The hipster movement, going back to craft and what's real and what's meaningful to us. So it's a very exciting time and it continues to grow.
Mhm.
I would agree.
So one question I would ask is, and this is something that I know has come up, and it's just about learning language in general. I mean, I have several cousins, and when I go over there and visit, the signs are all bilingual. But when you talk about language over there, they kind of talk about their school age experience and how you didn't come out as fluent as you might have, and you didn't have the opportunities to speak it like you would have. So a lot of it was lost directly after school would be over. And I guess for our listeners, the biggest question would be is the difference in, like you said, that learning of a language and how it differs from, or how it should differ from that old school parochial way of learning a language, of it being based on a lot on grammar, a lot on rules, and less on just spoken word.
Yeah, I mean, when we associate language learning with exams, exemptions, stress, Ireland is a very academically strong country. We have free third level education. We have, a lot of access to education, which is brilliant. But it also, I think, because Ireland is still kind of growing out of a history of poverty and kind of want and scarcity, and still is dealing with different issues like the housing crisis, that people are still putting a lot of emphasis on, okay, if you're academically brilliant, you need to study law or medicine and get these results and go to these universities and make money, etc., instead of fueling this soul connection and what makes the heart sing and what makes us happier as people. And the study of Celtic languages, it's proven people who study Celtic languages are happier and feeling more fulfilled in their life choices, etc. So I think if we associate language learning with the culture, the dance, the Gaelic games, the songs and stories and etymology and proverbs, and the depth and wisdom and richness and beauty that is alive in the language, it makes us realize it's not a school subject. We don't need to give it up when we're 18. And also, the way it was taught traditionally by the Christian brothers or by nuns, because the schools are so deeply entrenched in religion still, I don't think they had the skills to teach. Nowadays, thankfully, we have, new research and new methods, and realizing how teaching can be gamified and how learning can be incredibly effective and soulful and meaningful. And so that was really important to me creating my courses, to really break it down and realize what are the patterns, because Irish is a very, very logical and regular, consistent language. People don't believe that because they're looking at this jumble of words or letters going, what? Like, how the hell does BHF sound like W? Like, that makes no sense. Or TH sounds like or FH sounds like nothing. I know it's a lot to take on board and it can be very challenging and frustrating. But the great news is it's orthographically shallow, meaning it is very consistent. So if you just learn and accept and practice and have patience and say, okay, BHF sounds like W or V, depending on whether it's broad or slender. We have two different types of vowels. Of course, it's going to take a little bit of time and a bit of stretching your brain to kind of accept that. But it's much easier than reading phonetics or trying to simplify it. People have all these ideas. Oh, why don't we just kind of create a new way of spelling? And actually, that would reduce the music in the language. That would change the meaning of the words. It's a bit like, Niamh, the girl's name. Niamh. You hear the song, you hear the dip, Niamh. And I love to work on pronunciation like that. Even simple things like falcha. Falcha is welcome. Falcha. It kind of has 3 syllables. It has that long ah sound, the fada, the accent. And this is where we get the music, the hills and valleys of the language and how we speak in Irish accents anyway. So it's beautiful to explore that and see the value in it and not look at it as like, utilitarian or it's a machine, because that's kind of how we're trained in the toxic Anglosphere, to think of everything as what use is it and how do I make money from it? But Irish is about the soul and the spirit and the memory of the Irish people and connecting with that on an emotional level and allowing it infuse our lives and make things better.
Molly, one thing I have always found, especially when I try to explore Irish music, music in Irish or, poetry and things like that, is a lot of the times the translation from Irish to English really misses the mark. Are there any songs or any sayings or maybe even some poems that you think are just stand out to you as just really being far more meaningful in Irish than they could ever be in an English translation? And wouldn't that be a good place to start for somebody who is, originally speaks English to kind of understand Irish and how that language is really so alive and so lyrical and a part of the, the Irish cultural zeitgeist, so to speak?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great point. I think one fast track way, a kind of shortcut to starting to learn Irish, is to think in Hiberno English, the way we speak English in Ireland. I'm only after talking to Greg, or she's given out to me for being bold. Of course, it's kind of like another new language to learn. But if you have that opportunity to watch shows like Father Ted or Derry Girls and listen to how people speak in Ireland, even through English, it's a great sense of this playfulness and flexibility with language. So it's beautiful to think that the words mean something slightly different and something richer and more meaningful. Even, for example, mishnach, which is courage. It's more of an everyday commitment to doing what is right than a storming the battle type of courage or bravery. Or the word gra, even, love. Gra is more so used with people in Irish and not things. And in English, we can tend to love everything. Like, I love that show, I love this chocolate, and I love my family. But in Irish, we would say there's love at me, on you, or my heart is inside you. Like, very lyrical, very poetic, and sometimes very literal and creative meanings, especially when we talk about, things like an escalator is a live stairs, or an otter is a sea dog,
I love
and
I love how
yeah,
a squirrel is a tree dog.
Yeah.
yeah. And sometimes I'm teaching these, and people say the Irish should be they should be allowed to name everything because this is so hilarious, you know. So I think it does take a kind of surrendering to another world and having a new perspective and lens on reality, which is a big part of the learning journey and a very wholesome and fulfilling and enjoyable part, is to realize it's a different language. It's a completely different way of seeing things. And it's very beautiful. Like, when we say achara, dear friend, we introduce or we address each other, achara, dear friend. And immediately it makes you feel closer to that person. Things like answering with the verb. I would be like, oh, are you Michael? I am. Do you have a podcast? I do. We're avoiding saying yes or no because we have no yes or no in the Irish language. So all of these different features are very unique and beautiful and bring a sense of magic and connection and vulnerability and intimacy to the way we connect with each other.
Right.
It's funny, I was going to bring that up
Even the way you're
from,
explaining it is much nicer than how I asked.
and, I was going to bring up, in the book, from everything you talk about, the idea that there is no yes or no in Irish. There's no real straight answer to anything in the Irish language. It comes with more feeling. It comes with more description. It comes, with just more context than just short, very abrupt answers.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's the thing. We're storytellers by nature, and the very structure of the language, we start sentences with the verb, says you. So this brings like an action, immediacy and urgency to the way we speak. And I mentioned, Maeve Binchy talking about how Ireland is full of storytellers. They'll always want to tell you their story, which is funny because when we ask each other, how are you? We don't expect an answer, or we don't want one, or we'd say, story with you, or what's the story? What's the crack? We don't want an answer. But then maybe when people don't want an answer, we still launch into a full story, going down all these different avenues, or when we give directions, but it's fascinating, I think, this relationship with the scale meaning story. And I explore the etymology of that word, sec. It means to say in Proto-Celtic. So it's like when we're just saying something, it becomes a story. And it's like all these different tabs open in our mind of how to bring this to life, or how to exemplify, or I don't know, articulate this in a way that's even more entertaining.
So Mollie, thinking about your website and all the countries around the world that you've touched, here in the United States, I think we all like to believe that the Irish people live in Ireland and North America and nowhere else.
Yeah.
Where would you say is one of the most surprising countries you've seen subscribe to your to the website, or maybe purchase the book?
Great question. Yeah, I mean, I have students in like Tasmania and also, well, like all over the place, to be honest. Um, Different parts of Africa, like in South America, there are Irish communities in Argentina and Chile, even in Bolivia. Like, it's quite surprising. I feel like now and then you'll have someone with Irish ancestry. I mean, now and then, all the time, people have a link to Ireland. But sometimes people will never have visited Ireland. They don't have any heritage. They just love the language and the music and the culture and the dance. And maybe they watched Riverdance and they got the graw for the Irish jigs and reels. And they said, it makes sense to learn the language. And I think that's kind of an opening or an awareness that Irish people took a bit longer to adapt to. When I started teaching about 12 years ago, teaching Irish, most of my students weren't from Ireland. And they would sometimes burst into tears with the sheer excitement and, just the beauty of expressing themselves in another language. And some of them had reached amazing levels of fluency even before they became my students. They were learning on their own, or they were struggling with learning for years and years. They found me in my one-to-one lessons. And it was incredible that might have been the first time they had a conversation in the language. And then over time, I think now maybe 40% of my students are Irish in Ireland.
Oh, wow.
Still have students all over the world, but Irish people more and more are kind of releasing this shame or judgment or feeling of inadequacy, like I should speak my own language and I don't, or ideas that it's too difficult or complicated or useless. They're realizing, okay, it actually makes sense if someone's able to explain it in a way that illuminates it. And it's not useless. I mean, you can get €1 off your pint if you order Os Gaeilge. And also, it's great for mental health. It's beautiful to kind of discover different ways how the language recognizes that feelings are on us, for example. They don't define us. And ways of connecting with who we are and feeling at home and belonging. These are all very useful things to have as a human being, especially in a world that's chaotic.
I'd love to hear more about how to get $1 off a pint.
Yeah.
Here in the
yeah,
United
yeah.
Do they offer that down at Tinker's Son, Michael? I'm not sure, but
I don't know.
that
You'd
might
have to
be.
talk to Brian about that. Yeah. Oh God.
I don't think
So
I will.
so someone who, you know, obviously there's a lot of interest in the language and learning. So could you give us, especially right now? I mean, right now it's March. It's a huge time of year that people come out of this season wanting more, wanting to be connected more to their culture, to their family's culture. What would you say, kind of give us like an intro, like first steps of what they would expect if they
Yes,
come on the website
with
and like
pleasure.
start a
So
class?
exactly. I have a free mini course on my website, irishwithmollie.com, and it offers 4 on-demand lessons, and they're about 20 minutes each, and it gives you a good idea of the structures of the language, simple, basic, useful phrases like the numbers, the colors, the etymology. Like I mentioned, I have such a huge interest in it. In Irish, we say sanasiacht, meaning the whisper of advice in the words. So every word is just loaded with beauty and meaning. And it kind of explores, simple things you might need in this free mini course: to order a pint or a coffee in Irish, to introduce yourself, to start a conversation with others, the way we don't have a verb to have. So we talk about things being at us. And you see very quickly from the beginning that Ireland, Irish really positions us in a different way in the world around us. We're not saying I am. We're saying like the feeling is on me. The thing is at me. If I like something or I would like, we're saying it would be good with me. So everything seems to be like under me, within me, around me, before me, towards me. And it gives us a very different experience of life going on around us. So I would say a good place to start is there. I've loads of free materials. There's a free pronunciation guide as well on my website, and a conversation circle starter with phonetics and the Irish and the English translations, and simple things to start realizing how patterned and accessible it is. Anyone can do it. I hear people every day saying, wow, it's clicking. It's finally making sense. Because of course there's a lot holding us back. People might be like, oh, I'm not good at languages. I don't think that exists. I think that's a myth that people like to hold on to. But there are ways to learn that are really energizing and entertaining and effective. And it's just a case of accepting and allowing yourself and saying, well, I want to learn, so I will. And I want Ireland to be bilingual, so I'll play my part. And it's such a beautiful journey. It's always good to learn anything. You can feel that progress. That's so, it's so good for us to be growing and realizing we're making an effort and it's happening for us. And it's a brilliant way, I think, to connect. It's the best way because it really encapsulates all of Irish culture, the way we think and breathe and laugh and connect, the way we are as people.
It's funny, Molly, somebody just gifted me a book. It's just an old version, the Cattle Raid at Cooley, and I was really excited about it, and I didn't open it or anything else like that, but when I did, it was Irish on the left-hand page, English on the right-hand page, and I made an absolute effort to read, but I was so distracted by the Irish in the left-hand side, and I just
Yeah.
kept thinking to myself, "That looks a lot more beautiful than what I'm doing over here," and I was wondering how
Yeah.
that's why I asked you earlier about, what phrases or things like that, but, I mean, everything, it seems like it's not a long-winded language, but we were watching the, Kilkenny and, Cork match a couple weeks ago, and there was an interview afterwards, and one of the, coaches, I forget his name, he came out and said something. It seemed like he was so expressive and so passionate about it, and I said to my friend, "What did he just say?" Because it was in Irish, and he said, "Oh, he was talking about how wet the field was and how hard they worked to get it ready for the game." I couldn't believe it. But what would you recommend? I mean, I like hearing the language. I think I do better when I hear it, so I try to listen to whatever I can in the language. Is that a good practice, or should you really be kind of mastering? Because then I spend the whole time listening for words that I know, which is probably like 100.
I get you. Yes, that's a really, really good point that people might get a bit, stressed. Oh, I can't understand everything and I'm trying, trying, trying. I think that the trick is to let it wash over you. Don't give yourself any expectations. You don't need to understand anything. It's about listening to the rhythms and the music. So it's a little bit like just enjoy the sounds. You don't need to understand, and you will realize over time, along with consistent effort of learning the basics and growing your skills and figuring out new words and, having a structured approach to learning, you will start understanding more and more of what you're listening to. But the great thing is there's loads of new podcasts you'll find on Spotify and Apple, like How to Gael and Gaelin is a new one. And they're really funny and brilliant and bilingual. So Gaeilge Weekly is a great one as well. And he does like an easy mode and a harder version too. So I think Radio na Gaeltachta, for example, is the radio with native speakers, and that can be off-putting sometimes. It can be just really fast and really complicated, but it's also a great way to kind of listen to, the real pros speaking so fluently and so beautifully. And I think that's the hardest thing, to let go our own barriers. And the mind is kind of fighting with us, saying, oh, you're never going to get there and everything, but the brain is soaking it all in and doing the work. But yeah, I've got lots of learning tips as well at the beginning of my courses on where to go. There's different websites for reading, graded readers, very simple starter books like for children as well, or for adult learners, and you can listen along. I have a newsletter every week and I record all of those on YouTube, but YouTube is full of nursery rhymes and songs and different things to listen to as well. So I think with technology, we're really seeing, a democratization of the language and people creating new resources and new ways to learn. So it's brilliant. It's
That
a
is so
very
good.
effective, very rich kind of new world opening up to the learner.
That is so good to
Yeah.
hear, because I mean, we want it to expand, and it certainly would be nice to see a resurgence, here in the States, where we are, where there's so many um, people, from Ireland or people with Irish ancestry and things like that. It would be nice to hear more kind of native conversations. Now you're fairly surprised when you hear it outside of, say, the cultural center, or, in Michael and I's world, we know quite a few people who are fluent, and Irish was their first language, but it would be great to see it, maybe even offered in schools, and on university campuses too, because I don't think that there's enough of that in this neck of the woods.
Hmm.
Yeah.
No, I think
What
we're
one
on a really pivotal moment. Yeah.
one thing I wanted to bring up, and it's also to make our listeners known, so in our area, Boston Metro, we are very lucky. Like Greg said, we have local Gaeilgers. There's coming to Gaeilge. You can go and you can have conversations. But one thing that I really took from your program early on is that you're taking advantage of technology so that you can get everybody together in like a group Zoom call and they can try their Irish out. And it's okay if you make a mistake. You're amongst everybody else that's in the same position you're in. And I think that is really that takes a lot of the pressure off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, working with people with different learning needs my whole life has really kind of amplified this sense of how learners learn and how teachers teach and how everyone is at their own pace. When you're in a group, there's always going to be one person waiting for everyone else, another person trying to catch up frantically. There's all this stress that comes along with language learning. So I wanted to create something that was really easy and flexible to use. You get lifetime access. So you don't need to start today or tomorrow. You can log in whenever you feel. And like that, there are always going to be people who are more fluent and more accurate and ahead of you in some ways, and other people who are just starting. And if you know how to say Gaeilge, hello, you can teach them. Teaching is one of the best ways to learn because it really consolidates what we know, and we have to kind of practice it and try to perfect it. But absolutely, mistakes are how we learn, and embracing those mistakes and realizing, you know, everyone makes mistakes. Native speakers make mistakes in their speech. And it's just a very welcoming and supportive community. And I think it's just a great way to celebrate the language and not try to constrain it or be too rigid, because language is always evolving. And at the end of the day, it's about community and crack and communication and trying our best and being understood. And yeah, I think technology has done a lot, and social media as well. We know the Gaeltacht, the Irish TikTok, with different comedians or fashionistas or musicians, new people on the scene every day, you know, bringing the Irish language to the masses, which is absolutely incredible to see.
Do you have obviously most of your students must be adults or at least early 20s. But what about for I mean, I myself, I wanna learn, but I know during the process of me learning, my children, they're 12 and 8, and I know because I've used even something as simple as Duolingo, and you talk about the game, gamifying it, and my 8-year-old daughter Maggie, like, over my shoulder, and she's interested because it has that type of interaction. Um,
Mhm.
do you see an opportunity for you to kinda introduce your program to, like, that type of audience, like a younger generation?
Yeah, definitely. I am thinking about creating something specifically for children. Like at the moment, I do have a lot of children and teenagers learning with my courses, and maybe as a family doing the quizzes together. A lot of the resources are very kid friendly. There's loads of visuals and songs and stories and poems and things like that. But at the end of the day, I think, yeah, shows like Cúla Ceathair, so Cúla and the number 4 on TG Ceathair on the Irish TV station are brilliant because kids can watch a show that they know and just listen to it in Irish, like SpongeBob or Shrek or whatever they have going on. And likewise, there's lots of new YouTube channels that are like stories being read in Irish and the alphabet song in Irish and stuff like that. So it's a great way to start. I think likewise, Shopaliower, for example, is a bookshop in Dublin, and they have a great selection of kids' books and recommendations. And they're very open and friendly if people want to email them and get more recommendations on books. And there's a beautiful book called Mechut Auran Gaeilge, which is like my Irish songs. And specifically for kids. You press a button and you can hear them and listen along, and they go through
Oh,
the
wow.
Irish traditional instruments. So a lot is being created at the moment, which is very hopeful.
No. What do you, as someone who is obviously as passionate as you are about the language and not only in Ireland, but as you said, the entire diaspora, what do you have any ideas in your head as to where you hope things will go and how in depth the language will be at some point in Ireland itself?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're at an interesting point in the journey where there's a lot of interest. All these young people are creatively making things. We sing all this merchandise as Gaeilge, like posters and hats and t-shirts and bags and, new font like being resurrected, like the Gaeilge, the old Irish font coming back. And yet maybe not enough teachers teaching it because there's always these call outs for more teachers. There's so much demand there, and yet not enough skilled people who can explain things in a very clear way. So I would love to create an academy of teachers who can teach the language, travel abroad, join from anywhere in the world. Like you said, in your area, there's also a lot of desire to learn, but maybe you'd love it to be introduced to schools as an option and have more kind of access to it and
Yeah.
also normalize the teaching of it. So I think that could be a great next step because there are a lot of amazingly talented and creative people working hard to bring it together. So I think something like that would be the next step.
That would be incredible just to I mean, I always think about why that well, I'm constantly complaining why aren't there more Irish history and cultural courses at, some of our local universities, but I mean, just the addition of Irish language in
Mm.
in one package, maybe a certificate program or something. I think it would be incredibly popular for people to and but also very meaningful to, be able to tie all of those kind of courses in and, for people of Irish ancestry here in the United States, to be able to take that out into, their own world and share it, I think it would be unbelievable. So I'll I'll be keenly watching how whatever you're
Yeah.
offering is to the younger kids because I think that's something that, certainly when I was growing up, in a fairly, you know, Irish-centric environment here south of Boston. I mean, the language wasn't never a discussion. I mean, yeah, we knew
Yeah.
some people who spoke it, but it was usually somebody's grandmother, and it was, they'd yell at you and you'd run away laughing, not knowing what they yelled at you about.
Yeah.
I just learned, probably 10 years ago that generally I was being screamed at following somebody saying "Bocally, Bocally," which was boys, boys, and then something
Oh.
else. I didn't know. I knew the word Kalini was many girls. I didn't know that Berkeley was many boys, but we had a friend of mine's grandmother, actually a cousin of mine, who would love to scream that, and then we just knew it was time to run away. But, so I
That's
think that
amazing.
bringing that experience earlier on, sort of in as you said, kind of a more of a natural way would be incredible to the younger to the really young, elementary school
Mm.
age children. I think it would only help the future of the language and the culture.
Yeah. I think, not having really brilliant teaching or investing in teaching was because Ireland was going through a survival and recovery stage, I suppose, after the famine, genocide, and kind of feeling, let's work our way out of poverty and build the nation. And now we're at this celebratory stage where Ireland is one of the richest countries in the EU. Supposedly, I mean, people are still struggling in Ireland and the Gaeltacht regions, especially. But it's a time for reckoning. Like, we're not the Celtic Tiger Irish. We're not the subjugated slaves to the English Irish. We are our own people with our own language. We have our own culture, and it's very inclusive and accessible and beautiful and can teach us so much about what life in the island has meant and could mean for a better future. So I think it's beautiful to be learning and growing into that and realizing learning Irish doesn't take away from being native English speakers. That's also a privilege, having fluent English, and it's a great thing. And I don't think we take that for granted. But to be able to speak and understand and enjoy our native language is so vital to who we are, and so beneficial in many ways.
It's funny you say that because one thing that we talk, Greg and I and our circles talk about a lot is how even here, which is an epicenter of Irish American community, it still feels like there's like a cultural renaissance going on where people really wanna, like, they're looking for not that stereotypical Irish culture aspects anymore. They're looking for authenticity. They really want to feel like they're connected back. And that I think
Mm.
that's another reason why language here, people are much more interested in language and just, seeking people like with regards to music and culture and whether it's poetry, all of it. It is definitely in a renaissance type, like you said, a celebratory phase. It's the same here. Yeah.
Great to hear that. Yeah.
Well,
It's
Molly,
so interesting.
yeah. Uh, have you ever been to the States?
I have, yeah, for family reunions twice when I was a young teenager. So I haven't been back ever as an adult. I was there when I was about 12 and again when I was like 14. So that
Oh
was
wow.
20 years ago.
Oh
Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
I'd love to come
It
back.
has definitely
I'm
changed in
excited.
20
Yeah.
years.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
No
there's a fan.
comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a fantastic conversation. We want to do a more of a longer series on the language. Like I said, we're very lucky we have, local Comino Gaeilge. We want to talk to someone from there, basically just giving people and communicating to them that there are resources at their fingertips to be able to give them that experience and to learn and find out more about the language. So this is a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming on with us today.
I'm delighted. Thank you so much, guys. It's a pleasure. And
The
keep up the
pleasure
good
was
work.
all ours. I was really looking forward to this, and it didn't let me down. And I always say to Michael, whenever we interview musicians, it's very poignant and very emotional. But I think the way you were speaking about the language and the resurgence and the culture and how that ties in together, that had a big impact on me. Made me want to rejuvenate and reinvigorate my efforts at learning Irish. So maybe I will be able to have a discussion in Irish when Davy Holden comes in
Yes.
April. But
Yeah.
bare
Yeah.
minimum, I'm going to figure out how to get $1 off a pint to Esquilga before we're
Yes.
done.
Yeah. That'll be the revolution.
That's my new
Yeah.
No, it's
goal.
few Augustus Pager. It's worth it. You can do it.
Oh God. So for everybody that's listening and watching, we'll put links to all of Mollie's stuff with regards to the book, The Gaeilge Guide, and her website, Irish with Mollie, along with some local resources for language. And that'll all be in the show notes. So you'll be able to take a look at that. And we just like to say thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This was a great conversation. Um, and thank you again, Mollie, for coming on.
You're of Mila Mahagwif. Thanks a million to you both.
So that'll be it for this episode of Crack on the Coast. For anyone, you can link, subscribe, share it with a friend. Uh, how it gets shared will determine the success of this podcast. We've been going a year now, and I have been. I will say, and I know Greg will agree with this. The conversations that we have been able to have with the individuals we've been able to have has been astonishing, and today is just another example of that. So. If you have any recommendations of who you think we should talk to or topics that you'd like us to cover, you're more than welcome to email us at craic@gmail.com. That's CRAIC on the coast at gmail.com. And that'll be it, folks. Slán go fóill.
Slán.
Slán.
There's a moment before every traditional Irish session when the room is still finding its rhythm. A fiddle case opens, a guitar is tuned, someone orders the first round, and before long, the music takes over. Tonight, Craic on the Coast is in Plymouth, Massachusetts at Indie Firm for the very first installment of a new series we're calling South Shore Sessions, a celebration of the musicians, venues, and communities keeping the tradition of the Irish session alive right here on the South Shore. Sessions thrive when musicians have a place to gather, a room where the music is welcome. And tonight, that place is Indie Firm. Owned by Paul Nixon, Indie Firm has quickly become one of Plymouth's most unique gathering spots, a brewery, tap room, and community hub that embraces live music and local culture. Places like this are essential because without venues willing to open their doors, the tradition has nowhere to land. Hey everybody, Mike Craic on the Coast here with the owner and operator of Indie Firm, Paul Nixon.
That's me.
And I guess as someone who represents part of the Irish and Irish American community, I would just like to say thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. It's a pleasure to have Steve and the crew here, and nice to have you here today, Mike.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really is a perfect setting for what Steve's doing.
Yeah, it's cozy, you know,
Yeah.
and it makes sense. This time of year, it feels right. You get the snowbanks outside, and the room is packed with great people and great music. It's a fun day. I think this is the 4th time we've done it.
Yep.
We'll do a few more indoors this spring, and then once the weather gets better, hopefully soon, we'll start moving outside on every other Sunday.
How did all this come together?
Sabrina is a customer of ours. I don't know her last name, but she's originally from Ireland, and she comes in every once in a while, and she says, you should have my friend Steve Lindsay play here. And I'd heard of Steve Lindsay. I didn't know him, but I'd heard of him. And I was like, well, I guess we could give it a try and see how it goes. And now that, like I said, this is the 4th time. So Sabrina's idea to start with, and she introduced me to Steve. And then Steve brings his key players there with Mance and Sean, and then everyone else is sitting in and helping out and adding what they can.
Leading tonight's session is Steve Lindsay, a familiar face in the South Shore music scene and a musician deeply connected to the tradition. For players like Steve, sessions like this are about more than performance. They're about community, about keeping tunes alive and passing them from player to player, not from sheet music, but from memory. I was talking to some folks who this is I think their 2nd time coming down, and they said, the tightness of it and the coziness of it reminds them of when they've been over to Ireland.
To Ireland, right. And that's what we're looking for,
Yeah.
And, everyone gets a crack, so it's open. So if you're a musician, you want to do a song or something, we'll ask you to do one, sit in it,
And that's been great too. Like there's been young people who've been coming in, and it's just an open invite to anyone who wants to play. And yeah, they got to get over the shyness, obviously.
Right.
But
and you got to do your homework as well.
Right.
You can't be,
Yeah, exactly. But I think this is great.
Good. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
South Shore's newest Irish.
Yeah, down here at Indie Firm on Camelot Way.
Yeah.
I think this is great. This has been South Shore Sessions from Craic on the Coast. And if you know a musician or a venue that should be part of the next session, we'll see you there.